I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are going to craft an unbelievable hour of radio called For a Green Future. Unbelievable because it's so amazingly good, not because the facts we're going to give you aren't believable. But yeah, For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family and the people that you're, if you go to church, those people, or if you go to work, the people you work with, or if you just, walk around and see random people, them too, because all of us are caught together, wrapped up on this big, wonderful, wibbly-wobbly ball that we call planet Earth. And we've got a good show for you today. We're going to just chat for a few more minutes here, about 10 minutes. Then we have an interview with a woman named Abby Meyer, and it's a follow-up to a news report we did last week about they've done a new study of literally all the native species of trees in North America and what's going on with them and if they're threatened or not. So she's one of the people who actually physically did this study, so I was happy to be able to land an interview with her. Then we'll hear from our wonderful, beautiful patrons and sponsors. And after that, Rebecca will be talking to us about what exactly, Rebecca?
Turkey vultures.
Turkey vultures. Okay, so they're not as beautiful as our patrons and sponsors, but they're...
Well, that's a matter of opinion.
Well,
turkey vultures, our patrons and sponsors, are not that cute either. They're insufficiently feathered and don't have a bald red head, and their breath does not smell like yummy, delicious carrion. Why would you want that?
Okay, good points, Rebecca. Well, in my opinion,
they don't even have any wings.
Oh, all right, good points from the point of view of a turkey vulture. So yes. I see you really got into getting this report ready. That's great.
Assuming, I don't know.
Okay, then after we hear from Rebecca, we're going to hear some ecological news, quite a bit of interesting stuff happening worldwide in terms of the environment and ecology. And hopefully during the show at some point we'll hear from you. Feel free to call in at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. Anytime during the show, and you can call in about any sort of ecological or environmental question you've got, and we will be happy to talk to you. So, all right, so just a few things I wanted to chat about before we get on to the interview with Abby Meyer. One, last week I reported that my father-in-law had passed. John King was his name. He was 98 and a half. And last night, or yesterday morning actually, was his funeral. And I had to prepare his eulogy, which I'm not going to, force upon you folks listening. But just interesting, he was born in 1924. And so he lived in a very different Toledo than we have now. One thing he used to tell me about was the Anthony Wayne Trail was actually, when he was a kid, was actually a canal.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and it was used
That's
to,
how it started out.
yeah, used to transport goods.
They took some of the timbers out of there and used it to make the zoo too,
Oh, really? Huh.
or some of the buildings like the aquarium and stuff.
I did not know that. But yeah, canals are actually literally the most energy efficient way to move goods and services, but
Wow.
even more efficient than trains. And so, and speaking of trains, he and his mother, they lived in downtown Toledo. They lived in a pretty poor neighborhood, actually, but they would take the electric interurban trolley out to Rossford every Sunday to go to the Ukrainian church out there.
Excellent.
And so, it's just a reminder that everything doesn't have to go on an asphalt road in a separate truck to get to places. There are other ways to do it, more efficient ways that use less energy. And we actually built this fantastic society we've got using those technologies, because that's how Toledo was built, as you pointed out.
Right.
Getting the timbers for the zoo.
And in our, everybody says, oh, we're too small a city. That's not, we weren't just like, oh, we're too small, let's not. It wasn't, there was actually a thriving public transit system, and someone bought it and shut it down. The car companies bought it and shut it down.
Right.
Did not die a natural death, was murdered.
Yeah, it was a deliberate decision to switch us over to a less efficient transportation system. And, that was not a good decision, and there's still repercussions today. But the good news is we could actually go back to that. We could reestablish an electric interurban trolley system. And with modern technology, it could even be a battery-powered electric mass transit system. So you wouldn't actually need to hang wires everywhere. Although those hanging wires are kind of cool, because as things go along on them, sometimes you get these huge sparks of,
Yeah, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it is a little more fun to watch. And speaking of fun, another thing I wanted to mention was last night. I'm a little tired because I was up till about 1 a.m. last night. I volunteered over at the Black Swamp Arts Festival down there in Bowling Green, which was a lot of fun. But I was on recycling detail, and we probably ended up recycling, I would estimate, about a ton of water bottles and aluminum cans and things like that. So that was nice that we were recycling so much of the trash, but it also kind of showed me the limits of the recycling situation, because we had to, for example, we couldn't recycle those plastic cups that they pass beer out in, even though they're number 2 plastic, because the facility that recycles everything else for some reason can't handle that shape of plastic. So even though it's technically recyclable, we still had to put all those cups in the trash. And, that shouldn't even be an issue anymore. I mean, we should be able to either recycle, reuse, or compost literally everything we use in this society. Every container.
Get the machine or make it in a different shape or something.
Yeah. And I was thinking of, like in Germany, you have your own mug, right? You bring your own Stein, I forget what they call it, Stein. Oh, just Stein,
Right.
beer Stein.
Stein.
To the bar, and they fill it up for you, and you drink it. It's great. And so there's no reason we should be even using all these number 2 plastic cups. And there were thousands and thousands of them, of course, because the music was great, the food is great, there's tons of food trucks, and the art is great. And so, festivals like that are part of the green future. We're still going to have festivals even once our society is completely carbon free and we're all acting sustainable. It's still going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have stuff like that, probably even more so, I would guess. So that was fun. And then, of course, I have to kind of mention today, since this is the 9/11 episode of For a Green Future, we've got to mention, the 9/11 disaster, the attack on the United States there. And I was listening as we were coming in, I was listening to C-SPAN, because they were having a ceremony and they were listing off the names of the individuals who were killed in that terrorist attack. And it just reminds me that the environmental thing worth noting about that, leaving aside all the geopolitical stuff, the environmental thing is that the Twin Towers burned for, well over a week after they were destroyed. And that smoke went out over New York City. And the EPA told everyone that that smoke was not hazardous. And the reason they did it, it's very clear wartime propaganda. You minimize the damage the enemy has done to you. You put a positive spin on everything. But that smoke was full of asbestos particles. It was full of all kinds of benzoene and toluene and all kinds of nasty toxic chemicals, and it was very toxic. And a lot of first responders listened to the EPA when they said it wasn't that hazardous, and firefighters and rescue people went in there with inadequate gear, inadequate protection, and a lot of them also died as a result of the injuries to their lungs and so forth. And it's good that we remember the people who were killed in the attack itself, but we also have to remember that a lot more people died afterwards from the aftermath, in part because the government told us the wrong thing. The government did not share the truth with the people of America, and we have to always insist on the truth. And there's a lot of untruths going around out there, but I just want to also, in addition to the innocent victims of the attack itself, I do want to not forget the innocent victims of the aftermath of the attack. Those people, a lot of them were actually, a lot of them died quite heroically because they put themselves into that dangerous situation, hoping to save people, hoping to find some survivors and so forth. And they were very brave, and they also paid the ultimate price. So I just didn't want to forget them today. All right. So anyway, a little time to move on in the show. And I think it's time we go to our interview with Abby Meyer. If you want to go ahead and play that, Joshua.
All right. Hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you just please tell us your name and who you're with?
Hi, my name is Abby Meyer, and I'm the Executive Director of BGCI US, which stands for Botanic Gardens Conservation International US Office.
Okay, well, welcome to the show. And I called you guys because you folks did a pretty important study in terms of understanding the natural world and what things are going on here. You did a comprehensive survey of the tree species in North America and which ones are threatened. That's a pretty impressive task. How did you guys go about doing that exactly?
Right. Well, it was a long-term initiative. Over the past 5 years, we've been working at it. I've been part of a really fantastic team that consisted of partners from 2 botanic gardens in the U.S. That's the Morton Arboretum in Illinois and the U.S. Botanic Garden in Washington, D.C., as well as 2 conservation networks, which is NatureServe and BGCI, my organization. And then we also partnered with the USDA Forest Service. So we had a great team, and over the last 5 years, like I said, we covered some good ground. We used a standardized definition of a tree and made a checklist of trees native to the contiguous U.S. that contains about 900 species. And basically, now that we know this list, we can characterize our tree flora in the U.S. more, as well as understanding the threats to our trees. So that's what we set out to do.
Wow. Okay. So you identified all these tree species, and then you categorized the threats to them. Now, how did you go about doing that? Did you look at research that was already published, or did you folks actually get out in the field and look at trees?
So we did a little bit of everything, actually. The folks on the partnership team do work with trees and are familiar with several species across the U.S. And we also engaged hundreds of volunteer scientists and tree experts across the nation to ask their advice and share their expertise. then we compiled all the information. We looked at published literature as well, like you said, and we compiled all the data together into a species assessment for each of the species, and came up with a score for each species to determine what their threat status is in the wild. And based on that, we found somewhere between 11 and 16% of these species are threatened. That's 1 out of 9, and that totals around 165 species.
Wow, amazing. And as I understand it, this was really the first time anyone had made a comprehensive list of all the tree species in North America.
Well, it was a unique project in that we used a standardized definition of a tree, and we looked at native U.S. trees. There have been other efforts in the U.S., especially through the USDA Forest Service, to characterize and define the tree flora of the U.S., but oftentimes that included introduced or non-native species of trees, as well as some different definitions that were used across the different periods of time. So yeah, this is a unique list, and now that we've kind of drawn a line around the perimeter of all the different species that we want to focus on, now we can prioritize our actions.
So what are some of the species that people might recognize that are on this list of threatened plants or threatened trees?
Oaks are a really iconic tree group. There's several threatened oaks. There's ash trees in the U.S. that are threatened. One that's of interest is the Fraser fir, which is a really common Christmas tree, actually, that's threatened. So those are a handful of ones that people might recognize, yeah.
And what is the nature of these threats? I mean, you mentioned ash, and those of us in Northwest Ohio remember, most of us can still remember the wave of emerald ash borer that wiped out our ash trees. But what are the nature of some of these threats?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. Actually, the most common threat that we found for U.S. trees was invasive pests and diseases. Some other really common threats that we found were climate change, habitat loss, and similar things like that. But really, by and large, the most common threat to U.S. trees is invasive pests and diseases. Interestingly, I recently was looking at the published literature on invasive insects for U.S. forests, and there are somewhere between 400 and 500 invasive insect species impacting U.S. forests today, and that number grows every week or every year. We get new invasions. So there's quite a tremendous number of insects. That doesn't even include diseases. So you can kind of imagine the scope of the problem that we're facing. I would just say that the effects of climate change, coupled with the rapid introduction of these invasive pests and diseases, really is a recipe for destruction. And plants just can't keep up, especially trees that are very long-lived. So their generation times are quite long. Interestingly, bark beetles are really common, one of the most common insects that are impacting U.S. forests. Bark beetles are part of one of the largest animal families in the world, with over 80,000 species described. And
wow.
they often attack trees that are already weakened. That's so, as you can imagine, with the effects of climate change, with drought, fire intensity, greater intensity of storms, things like that can weaken individual organisms and make them more vulnerable. That's not, 100% of the cases for all the species that we're seeing, but yeah.
So you mentioned that you cataloging this problem. I think part of the reason you did that is because you're hoping that we can start having more effective responses to these invasive insects and the other problems that come along. Do you have some idea of what we could be doing to address this problem, what we could be doing to improve our response?
Right. So the good news, along with the bad news of 165 tree species in the U.S. really need our attention, and they're threatened with extinction in the wild. The good news is that botanic gardens and similar types of organizations are very well positioned to scale up tree conservation in really important ways. Botanic gardens offer some really unique skill sets and resources, as well as facilities and expertise. So gardens, for example, know how to grow most species in the world. We estimate worldwide that botanic gardens grow about 30% of known plant diversity in the world. And so the horticulture expertise that botanic gardens offer around the world is really important. Also, botanic gardens bring in a really important research and conservation capacity and have really excellent programs in place to study trees and forest dynamics, as well as the insects that are attacking them, and then learn and apply all of that information to decide how best to conserve those species. And really the third sort of component that botanic gardens and similar organizations bring in is this public outreach aspect and education expertise. And again, globally, we estimate that botanic gardens around the world, we estimate that botanic gardens reach around 750 million people every year. And so that's quite a powerful voice that we have to educate the public about the importance of these trees and their conservation stories, and as well as why we should be working to save them.
Well, that's good. That's good. You folks are out there trying to preserve stuff.
Yeah.
But what do you think of, like, the response? I'm thinking of the response to the emerald ash borer, for example. To some degree, that outreach was pretty ineffective. I mean, the main thing people were told was not to move firewood, but the borers had wings, and so they spread themselves pretty effectively, even without firewood being carried around.
Exactly.
Do you think we need more effective, more rapid, stronger actual response when these invasive species first appear?
Right. That's a great point. So every insect pest or disease that's introduced has its own set of unique characteristics and qualities and life histories and generation times and on and on. So understanding the complexities of each particular insect disease is really important. And so for emerald ash borer, for example, by the time emerald ash borer arrived to Ohio, Pandora's box was pretty much almost opened. So by that time, it was sort of a tidal wave of invasion that couldn't be prevented. However, the public outreach aspects were important in slowing the spread, if at all possible. But really, what you mentioned at the end there of your question, which is early detection, it's centered around early detection. That's really the key with incursions of new pests and diseases. If we can pinpoint new insect invasions or introductions early on, before they expand and mushroom into bigger problems, that will save a lot of problems on the back end.
I remember in California, they had Jerry Brown's strong response to the medfly, which was criticized at the time, but probably saved the California citrus industry. What was the impetus for the study? How did this get started 5 years ago?
Oh yeah, thanks for that question. So this U.S. Trees project actually happened under the umbrella of this larger global initiative called the Global Tree Assessment. And that was led through Botanic Gardens Conservation International, BGCI. And it was aimed at, again, identifying at a global level all of the tree species, which we found around 58,000 tree species, and then assessing their threat status. And so we picked up the slack in the U.S. and really dug in and focused on our tree flora as part of this bigger global effort. Maybe two things that we found that could help us characterize the U.S. tree flora a bit more was we found that two plant groups in the U.S. really dominate the tree flora, which is oaks and hawthorns. And they have a little over 80 species for each of those groups. And then geographically, we also found some patterns, some trends, that most of the U.S. tree diversity is concentrated in the southeastern U.S. and places like Florida, as well as California and Texas. And then also the most threatened species that we see are also in those same places. So we were able to characterize a bit more and then also prioritize efforts and focus expertise and things like funding to the species and regions that need it the most.
Again, thank you very much.
I think that covers it, and thank you so much, Joe. This was really fun, and thanks so much for your interest and your time.
And thank you folks for listening. An important study, one we should be paying much more attention to what's happening to our forests in terms of getting wiped out by these invasive insects, because every time that happens, that literally costs us billions of dollars in terms of the services that the forest provides in terms of food, cleaning the air, protecting the water resources, all those wonderful things trees do. Every time we lose a species, literally everyone in the United States or North America gets poorer because those trees are no longer providing that service because they're gone. So, and if we don't pay attention, there's no limit. And if we don't pay attention, they could all eventually get wiped out. So, great interview with Abby Meyer. And if you have a comment on that or anything else, it's not too late to call in, 877-909-1007. And now it's time to hear from our wonderful patrons and sponsors. Hooray! For Green Futures brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them, find out what they're doing. One is to call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, probably the simplest way, which is wcparks.org. And you can also go to the App Store and download their app for your phone or other device. Just search in Eddy App Store for WC Parks. And of course, they're on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc. And of course, as I've been saying, you want to do that right now because they're getting ready to have their annual native plant sale, which is not to be missed. And so if you go on any of those things, you can find out the dates and the time and go get yourself some really nice, beautiful native plants. And For Green Futures also brought to you by our patrons. Patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. And they searched for Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They picked the level of membership that matches their budget. And so every month, a little bit of money comes out of their accounts, comes over to us. And that's how we can afford to keep bringing you this show. And of course, part of this, what you get when you listen to this show, are Rebecca's weekly explorations of cool natural stuff. So Rebecca, what do we got on tap this week?
Okay, well, this week I was walking back from some medical appointment, and I was kind of wending my way up through Collingwood Springs in Toledo, and kind of behind a couple of streets in an alley behind a convenient mart, I saw a turkey vulture. Now, I've been hearing about turkey vultures, and they're really big in Northwest Ohio. Everybody's telling me, oh, yeah, turkey vultures here, turkey vultures there. Never saw any until about 2 days ago.
Uh-huh.
It looked like a large raven, and then I noticed the head.
Oh.
That is how you tell. So I thought I'd look up a little bit about turkey vultures. Yeah, they're from the genus Cathartes, which means cleansing in Greek, because they clean things up. They literally clean. They're the janitors of the natural world, them and the bacteria and whatnot. Apparently, they're one of 5 genera of New World vultures. There's Old World vultures and the New World vultures, and apparently they're not. It's convergent evolution. They think they're not that closely related. So, yeah, that's caused all kind of interesting controversy. Apparently, Cathartes has 3 extant species and 1 extinct. And the live ones, there's a kind with a black head, a kind with a red head, which is turkey vultures, and a couple kinds with yellow heads.
Yeah, I never knew that one.
Yeah, I think they're kind of more unusual. Yeah, they live year-round in South America, in the southern parts of the U.S., southern and maybe central, even in some places, and then some are only further north in the U.S. and Canada, southern Canada. The New World vultures look like Old World vultures, but may have evolved from. Well, okay, this is one idea. They thought for a while that New World vultures had evolved from storks, and Old World vultures had evolved from falcons. But then they found out, I think, that that's not right. So there's this controversy about whether they should be in the order of Falconiformes, Cathartiformes, or I'm going to try this again. Accipitriformes. I think they're for now, they're an Accipitriformes? Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and it was complicated. I had trouble with this part, but it was something about they are old and New World vultures developed into this order of their own very early, but then they split off. So they're more related than you think, but not that related, I guess. Yeah, the turkey vulture's Latin name is Cathartes aura, and it ranges all the way from southern Canada to Cape Horn. Where is that, in Argentina? I think maybe it's in Argentina. Anyway, it likes forests, but also lives in shrublands, deserts, and pastures. Has an incredibly keen sense of smell, which you'd think would be bad for a vulture, but they need to be able to pick up on that, sort of little whiff of gas being released as something starts to rot, basically. Yeah, they have no syrinx, which is a bird's voice box, so they can only make grunts and hisses.
Oh.
And no one wants to get close enough to hear those, basically, except for scientists. They have few natural predators. They're protected under the Migratory Birds Act of 1918. Vulture actually means tearing in Latin, which makes sense. They kind of tear stuff up. And turkey, because they look like a male turkey to people. In the family Cathartidae, there are 5 subspecies of turkey vultures. There's a very slightly different coloration or something like that, but they tend to hang out together and go through the same territory, so it can get kind of confusing. I guess they also roost with other kinds of vultures, including black vultures, even. It's a big old vulture party, all the vultures can come, I guess.
Interesting.
Wingspans are from 63 to 72 inches, length 24 to 32 inches, weight from 1.8 to 5.3 pounds.
Wow, 5-foot wingspan, weighing less than 2 pounds. That's interesting.
No, I don't know. Maybe the bigger ones tend to have, maybe like the 72-inch ones are 5.3 pounds. You gotta hope.
Oh, yeah,
Unless
okay.
they're just really like tiny bodied birds with huge wings. So they tend to be larger in the northern part of its range. The genders are pretty similar. They don't have very much differentiation between the genders of size or appearance or anything like that. Their feet have small webs, it turns out. Maybe that's why they think they're related to storks. I don't know. Their feet tend to be flat and weak. They can't grasp very well. They have blunt talons. So they do everything with the beak, basically. They're all about the beak. They have a skinny tail, and of course, we all know the things that we've heard about vultures, like that their heads have no feathers because they're going to be sticking in a carcass a lot. It's not healthy to have a bunch of flies around your eyes, you know. They basically feed their young by vomiting in their mouths. A lot of birds do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really just the vultures, and they go to the bathroom on their legs to keep cool.
I never heard that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
they poop on their own legs, you know, as a way of regulating their body temperature. So that's special.
Interesting.
They don't
Yeah.
think they hate all those ugly, nasty chemicals you smell like. You know? So, yeah. So and yeah. Oh, it's extra special thing. Sprays its vomit at predators.
Oh, okay.
Partly this is because it just needs to eject the heavy meal in order to fly away, and partly it's unpleasant to be vomited at projectily by a vulture.
That's something I've always avoided.
It's a little acidic, so it's bad if it kind of stings if you get it in your eyes. Plus, it's just generally very dismaying. So, don't go if you see this in an alley behind a convenient mart. Don't go up and hug it. Just don't do that. Also, an interesting fact: they have a reputation for eating rotting meat, which they do. But apparently, they try to get to the carcass as quickly as possible, so there's been minimal rotting. They like it fresh if they can get it fresh. They're just not that fussy.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for
You're welcome.
that report. And now it's time to move on to our ecological news segment. And unfortunately, we got to start off the ecological news with another report of someone who's passed, and that is Cecile Pineda. And Cecile Pineda is a Latina author. She was perhaps best known for her initial novel. It was a 1985 novel called Face, which is about a man who basically reconstructed his face after a terrible accident. And she was 89. She passed on August 11th. But the reason we're talking about her on For a Green Future is that one of her last books, and considered by many one of her best books, perhaps the best book, was a book called Devil's Tango, How I Learned the Fukushima Step by Step. And this one, you know, this one's worth picking up. It's got like 4.8 stars on Amazon. And it's a book basically about what the aftermath of Fukushima, essentially what the government of Fukushima did to limit things like press freedom, so the press can't report on the effects of Fukushima, and the ways that the people of Japan were sort of steered into believing, or steered away from paying attention to it, and steered away from drawing conclusions about how terrible nuclear power is by the government. And it's also full of like personal reflections and personal impressions about what was happening, and it's literally it's a great book. And Cecile Pineda was a great anti-nuclear campaigner, so we definitely mourn her loss. And I saw her at Bowling Green State University a few years ago.
Cool.
It was 2016 actually. She came and gave a lecture there, and it was inspiring. She was a great woman, and we're gonna miss her. One thing though that we're not gonna miss onto our next story are the German nukes. Germany has been steadily shutting down its nuclear power plants in accordance with its plan that it's had for many years now. And there has been a lot of pressure from the conservative German parties and from, you know, people like that, and from the billionaires, that now that Russia is squeezing Germany in terms of cutting off their energy supplies, cutting off the natural gas, cutting off the oil, and that a lot of people are trying to pressure the German government into keeping the nukes going, even though they're 40 years old. Like all nukes, they're, you know, at the point where they're starting to fall apart. And the 3 nuclear plants, though, at this point only supply about 6% of Germany's electricity, because Germany has gone so heavily into the wind and the solar, which has been holding up great despite all these droughts and all the pressures that are under the European electricity sector right now. But finally, Germany, the government has finally officially said, no, we are going to shut them down as planned at the end of 2022. Now, one concession.
Good riddance.
Yes, hooray, good decision. Stay strong, Germany. But one concession he did make is that 2 out of the 3 plants are going to be kept on standby, so that if there's a catastrophic drop in electricity supply for some reason for 1 year, during the next year, then they'll be able to kick them back on and start them up again. But according to their plan, during that year, they're going to bring a lot more wind and solar online. So at the end of that year, they'll be able to shut them down, even if there's some sort of problem there. And unfortunately, I wish our neighbors up there in Michigan were as farsighted as the Germans, but quite the reverse. The governor up there, Governor Granholm, has announced a plan. Governor Whitmer has announced a plan to reopen a closed nuclear plant.
No,
yes.
Governor Whitmer, no.
I know. Palisades nuclear plant, one of the most embrittled plants in the country, which means one of the most ready to break and have a meltdown, was closed a few months ago, and I had my day of joy, because I allow myself a day of unbridled joy every time a nuclear plant shuts down. But Whitmer in the meantime has been going around in the back rooms and making deals and making handshakes and smoking cigars or whatever they do in those back rooms. And
She's doing so well with the defending abortion and things.
Yeah.
She got to do this.
I know,
All right.
but then she has to go and reopen the closed nuclear plant, or she's trying to. She has a plan. It's dependent upon getting lots and lots of money from the federal government. But as we know, Nuclear Joe is just dying to give people lots of money to keep their nuke plants open. So we're going to look more into that next week. I hope to have an interview with some people who are involved in that fight directly. So, but one of the reasons that it's so important to get rid of these nuclear plants is our next news story, which we've had people on. Harvey Wasserman was on last week talking about the dangers of what's happening over in Ukraine with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. And what has happened this past week, this has really been a terrible suspense for all of us who watch the nuclear industry, because it's like they've been blowing up the lines going in, and then they get repaired, and so they start up again, and then they blow up those lines and the backup lines, and then they repair them, and the emergency generators come on, and then they can turn them off. And it's been this yo-yo, this up and down roller coaster ride as Zaporizhzhia is lurching towards a meltdown. But something that happened this past week, Russia destroyed the backup power plant, the thermal plant, which has been supplying the grid power to the nuclear plant. And nuclear plants have to have a grid power around them that they can stay synced to in order to keep running. And Russia blew up the backup power plant. So now Zaporizhzhia is supplying its own electricity, which is an extremely dangerous situation, and no nuclear power plant can do that for very long before it gets out of sync with itself and everything blows up and melts down. Yeah, it's not good. It's a terrible situation. And Germany, I think one of the reasons Germany decided to stick with their plan to close their nukes down is they looked just a few countries away at Zaporizhzhia, just like way back in Fukushima. They had decided to reopen to keep their nukes open, and then Fukushima happened, and Germany looked at that and said, maybe it's not such a good idea. And I think again, there was pressure to reopen, to keep their nukes open, but they're looking at Zaporizhzhia and going, no, this is crazy. We're not gonna keep our nukes open. So, but of course, Governor Whitmer drew the opposite conclusion. Yeah, let's keep something that terrorists could blow up and wipe out a good chunk of Michigan with. It boggles the mind. But so that's the latest news from Zaporizhzhia and the nuclear power plant there. Next story, we've talked about this before. In fact, we had a fellow on from the Center for Biological Diversity talking about this. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, had the tax credits for wind turbines. Yay, that's great. But it also had a ton of poison pills in it. But one of the poison pills that wasn't in it, but was a promise from Schumer to Manchin, was that they would pass legislation authorizing the Trans Mountain Pipeline this fall. And, I was kind of flabbergasted that he could promise something terrible like that. you're essentially reversing all the gains that are made in the IRA by saying, oh, we're going to open this huge natural gas pipeline, and we're going to stay dependent on natural gas for another 50 years. And so what Schumer is intending to do is attach this to the government funding, the government continuation bill. You know, the government's running out of money, as it often does, and so they have to pass legislation authorizing raising the debt ceiling, and that's going to happen just before the midterm elections in like October. And so Schumer said, well, I'll just attach the Trans Mountain Pipeline to that, and so if you want to keep the government running, you're going to have to vote to let us, you know, build this pipeline. There's a little tiny bit of pushback from the progressive Democrats on this, just a little tiny bit. They sent Schumer a letter saying, please don't do this. And exactly two Democrats have committed to this. This is according to a story in The Lever, which is levernews.com on September 8th. And the title is Most Dems Mum on Blocking Manchin's Pipeline Deal. And so they are complaining about it publicly, but only two have committed to actually voting against it and blocking it. One senator and one representative. The senator, can you guess the senator? If you had to guess which senator would actually commit to voting against this.
I give up.
Sanders.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
Bernie
that's good for
Sanders.
him.
Yeah, so he said he won't vote for it. And then in the House of Representatives, it's a representative named Mo Khanna, another Democrat, I believe from California. And so they sent Schumer a letter saying, please don't do this, but only two of them are committing to actually voting against doing it. And so, you know, if you're an environmentalist, if you're someone who understands, and there are over 650 non-governmental organizations understand this and have sent letters to the president and to Chuck Schumer and to all the senators and everybody saying, you know, don't approve this pipeline. So the environmental community is united in saying this is an idiotic idea. We don't care what you promised Joe Manchin, you know, screw him basically. And but so far it looks like Schumer's gonna push it through, and the chances of stopping it are actually fairly slim. So let's step away from that depressing information there and into something a little more interesting and kind of fun, and that is Car and Driver magazine this past week has done a comprehensive review of all the plug-in hybrid cars you can buy. And I mentioned that my Wonder Van, I had an emergency and I had to drive as fast as I could, and I hit 110 on my plug-in hybrid minivan. But they review all the plug-in hybrids that are available right now, and there's a lot of really good ones. The Ford Escape gets 105 miles per gallon electric, so 105 miles per gallon equivalent electrically. And I wanted to kind of contrast two of these cars that they reviewed there. One is my van, the wonderful Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid. It's not as good as the Ford Escape in terms of efficiency. It gets 82 miles per gallon electric, and it gets 32 miles. Officially, I've gotten it 35, but the official number is 32 miles all electric before you have to switch over to gas. And it costs $49,000. So it's, you know, a little expensive, but it's not horribly expensive compared to other new cars. But I wanted to contrast that with Ferrari's plug-in hybrid, the Ferrari SF90. Yeah, now I'm not suggesting anyone buy this car for several reasons. One, the EV range is only 9 miles. So
That's a problem.
So you're not going to commute to work in this thing. And the cost is kind of high. It's $507,000. So literally more than 10 times the cost. You could buy 10 Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrids.
Wow.
With the same amount you could buy for the Ferrari SF90.
You give them out as stocking stuffers.
Yeah. The miles per gallon efficiency is not bad. It's 51 miles per gallon equivalent, not as good as the Pacifica, but not too bad compared to some others. But the reason I wanted to mention it specifically was that turns out that car, the plug-in hybrid Ferrari, is literally the fastest car and driver has ever tested. It goes, 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds. And that's because,
So you could go 9 miles really fast, and then you're done.
Yeah. You could accelerate like crazy for 9 miles,
Right.
and before your battery runs dry. But during those 9 miles, it's like, white knuckles, hang on to that steering wheel.
All right.
But I wanted to point that out because, like my van, the reason is that it has 2 engines. It's got a internal combustion engine and the battery powered engine. And so when they're both kicking in at once, the acceleration is incredible. And so literally the fastest car ever. And I wanted to mention that for sure because I wanted to again point out that the green future is a fun future. All right, you will enjoy it more once we get over to electric cars and clean energy, and it's better. So if you're somebody who likes cars because you like fun and like to be able to accelerate fast, look at a plug-in hybrid because you're going to be able to blow everything else out of the water, even if you end up buying something like I got, the price of a minivan. So, but if you have lots of money to spend and all you care about is acceleration, literally the car you need to buy is this Ferrari SF90 because it's the fastest car around. You can blow everybody else out of the water. So, but that was fun. Another bit of good news before we finish, and we're running out of time here. The largest wind farm in the world just came online. I mean, pretty much wind farms are literally coming online every day now, and a lot of them are really big. But the world's largest just opened up. It's called the Hornsea 2, and it is a 1.3 gigawatt wind farm. And that, to put that in perspective, that's about 20%, roughly 20% more power than the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant.
Cool.
So, lots of wind power there. It's located about 50 miles offshore. It's enough power for 1.4 million homes, and it was financed by the British government and a Danish company, and they're saying, it's online, and these things, typically a wind farm can be put up in a matter of months once you've done all the planning and gotten the permits and everything. The actual construction takes no time at all, and so really it's the most practical way for us to get to electricity that's carbon free is wind. So wow, so that's about it for all the stuff I had planned.
In other news, if you're looking at the podcast, you can see Joe's headphones coverings are in a sorry state, and we need some nice viewer to knit or crochet him headphone cozies for his headphones, so they'll look better.
Oh, okay, all right. If you wanted,
or you could sew one made out of little fabric with chickens on it or something. If you want to do a lot of darts, I don't know.
All right. Well, if you want to do that, or if you want to send us any other comment,
right?
You could send it.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, send it to For a Green Future, P.O. Box 969, Bowling Green, Ohio 43402. And of course, other ways you can contact us is you can email us at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, and DeMare is spelled DEMARE, and it's FOR, agreenfuture.org. And then of course you can call or text us anytime at 419-973-5841. And so yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We love the feedback, and we always try to incorporate it into what we do. But it's been a great couple of days here, weather-wise and nature-wise. It's been a great time to get outside and see what's going on. And if you want to see lots of turkey vultures, Rebecca, just come down to Wood County because they're
excellent.
They're literally everywhere.
Well, I lived there for like 10 years and never saw any.
Oh, well.
Not in Bowling Green anyway. I'm not saying it took me until I was like in my 40s to ever see a hummingbird. Now I've seen a couple since then.
Well, it's, I actually just had turkey vultures like circling my yard.
Excellent.
Well, I'm not sure if it's excellent.
Well,
It always scares me a little. I was like,
maybe they know something you
what
don't.
do they
It's
know?
a little worrisome. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also remember one time when I worked in a ceramics factory, it was so exhausting that for my lunch time I would just go out and lay out in the yard, just lay out on the grass and sleep for 20 minutes.
Nice.
And then one time I woke up and there was a turkey vulture in the tree right
Looking
above
at
me,
you.
looking at me, saying,
How you feeling there, buddy?
Feel all right? Doing good? So, but they're essential parts of the ecosystem, and yeah, without their cleaning services, we would actually be knee deep in carcasses. So it's
Yep, we'd get diseases,
they're-
lots of diseases.
yeah, they're an important critter to leave be, to don't let them do their jobs. So,
Also, they will spread projectile vomit on you. So
yeah,
leave them
another
alone.
good reason to leave
Yeah.
them be.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's about it for our show. Thank you so much all for listening. This is Joe DeMare,
And Rebecca Wood.
and we are signing off.
Was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun